Okay, I'm just going to make a short video here to tell you about something called Desmos, which is going to be your best friend in this course. So if you just type in Desmos, DESMOS.com, you should get this come up. And what you want to click on here is Graphing Calculator. Now, many of you have probably used this before. I know a lot of teachers use it for grade 11, but if you haven't, this is what it is. It's essentially a very powerful graphing calculator that you can use on your computer. And the best part is it's web-based, so it works on Chromebooks and everything else. And what you can do is, I'll just kind of go over some of the basic features with you. The one that you probably care about the most is the fact that it can actually graph functions or equations. So I can graph something like y equals x squared, and it comes up as a parabola. It also, and this is nice too, uses function notation, so you can use f at x equals x squared. And the reason that that's nice is you can do things then once you've defined a function like that, as for instance, I could say f at 5, and you'll notice it says right here equals 25. So it actually evaluates it at that point. Now, when you're doing homework questions or whatever, you're more than welcome to use this. Try not to become too dependent on it, but use it as a way of speeding things up. So if, for instance, you have a very complex function like f at x equals 4x to the exponent 4 plus 5x to the exponent 3 minus 7x squared minus 13x plus 8. And you've got to evaluate it at a few points. That could take you some time, but if you go down to here and just say, okay, what is it at 10? Oh, it's 44,178. You'll find that this is actually much faster than a calculator for doing this, especially if you have to do multiple things all at once. Like if I have to find it at 10 and 5 and 12 and 15 and whatever. So it lets you find all those very nicely. It also, if you have a scrolling mouse, and if not, you can use the plus minus up here, but scrolling mouse is so much faster. You can zoom in and zoom out. And you'll notice that if you click on the function, the graph there, there's a few gray dots that appear, and those gray dots appear at any important points. So for instance, down here, it'll tell you exactly what the minimum point is, or the vertex of this particular function. And up here, it'll give you the two x-intercepts. And somewhere up higher over here, it will show you what the y-intercept is. So if there's any important points worth looking at, and actually this one has several more because it's actually a far more complex function. It's quartic. There's another point over here where it should have a maximum and then another local minimum, if you remember those terms. And if not, they'll come up in our course sooner or later. But it lets you find all kinds of information really nicely. If you're trying to see the details in the graph, you can do other things. For instance, over here, you can click on the graph settings. And there's a few things you can do here. One thing I usually do is I turn the display on. It just makes everything a little bit more contrasty, brighter, so you can see things better. But also, I usually like to modify the X and Y scales so that I can see this better. So right now, this graph, in order to see kind of the detail on it, I'm going to zoom in as much as I can and still have all the important stuff on the screen. You'll notice that it goes from about -3 up to important stuff happens up to until about 50, and then it just keeps going up forever like a parabola. So I think I'm probably good on my Y scale there, but it's really cramped side to side. So my X scale could be a little different. And if I just look at this right now quickly, I can see that all the good stuff seems to happen between about X equals -2 and X equals +2. So what I can do here is go down to X scale and just switch it from -2 to +2, and then it spreads it out so I can see what's going on better. And right now it's going up by 0.2s on the X. You'll notice that 5 boxes makes a total of 1 unit. So that's okay. If I don't like that, I can go up by a different amount. I could go up by 2s each time. That's a little intense. You can turn off minor grid marks, and maybe I want to go up by 0.5s or something along those lines. Whatever makes you happy to see the graph. And then once you're there and you've kind of got most of it, you can zoom in and zoom out a little wee bit. You'll notice that when I zoom here, it's going up by 5s on the Y scale, but maybe I want more detail there, so I can go back here and say the Y scale, I'd rather go up by 2s. And this lets you play with the graph and be able to see everything you need to see on it. So that's the basics of Desmos, is basically typing in functions, evaluating functions and whatnot. You can do other things with it. For instance, I'll type in another function. I'll call this one g at x. And if you're not creative, you just say y equals as well. That's fine. And I'll just make this equal to a simple parabola, y equals x squared. And then you'll notice more gray dots showed up, and those are the intersection points between the two, which is also a very useful thing to find when we're trying to find information about graphs and how they interact with each other. You can keep making as many graphs as you want. If you want to use function notation, you just have to keep giving them different names. Sometimes you may find an error. I think there are a couple predefined letters that you may not want to use, but other than that, it's actually pretty simple to use. For those of you who can't see me typing, because, well, you can't see me typing, you just see the results. If I want to put an exponent, for instance, on the x, I just use Shift 6 on my computer, which is the upward arrow, and then I can enter that in. And if you're stuck on something and you can't remember the shortcut for it, so for instance, I don't know how to type in the square root symbol, but down here on the show keyboard, I can access a bunch of different functions, including the square root symbol. So it lets you do that as well, or the absolute value function, etc. And then over here, there's some other functions you can use, especially later when we get into trigonometry. Won't be doing too much for the statistics, but we will be doing plenty of that. Now you can just type in regular trigonometry too. So for instance, I can do, what if I used HI? Let's do J at X equals sine of X, just a basic sine function. And at this point, you might notice that things are getting a little bit messy. So if you don't want all of them to be visible, you can just click on the colored dots over here and turn off those temporarily. They're still there. You can turn them back on again if you want. And then again, we start to decide whether we want to rescale this. So at the moment, you'll notice if I click on settings again, I'm in radians. If I want to switch over to degrees, I can do that. And then, for instance, I know sine does its thing kind of between 0 and 360 degrees. So I'm just going to go down to, I'll go from -30 to +390. I know that's a weird choice, but it's basically a little bit below the 0 and a little bit above the 360, just so I can kind of see where the pattern continues. And in this case, maybe I want to go up by, see, if I do 90-degree intervals, it's not quite as much detail as I want. So maybe I'm going to go up by, let's say, 30-degree intervals, or even 15-degree intervals. Oh, see, I typed in 15, it said 75. What that means is that 15 is too small, it can't fit it, so it does the next one that it thinks it can do. But manually, I can change that to 30. And again, you'll notice that it isn't look very high here. That's because our graph goes, let me get this out of the way, up and down to about plus or minus 30 on the y scale. And for the sine curve, we only want to go up to about plus or minus 1. I'm actually going to do -2 to +2. Again, just so that it doesn't go off the graph. And it's stepped at 2 right now, which means you don't see any graphs, but maybe I want to step it at 1. Or again, if you want a little bit more detail than that, you could go up by 0.5s. So playing with the settings can let you actually see a lot more detail in graphs. Turn the settings on and off for different functions, evaluate, and so on. So I think I'll leave it there for now, but you will see that we use this throughout a majority of the course for graphing and simplifying our tasks. So if you've got any questions about Desmos that haven't been answered here, by all means, ask me and I will do my best to answer them. Have a great day.